Roger. Okay, I think you're pulling the wrong one. Okay, I'm ready to pull it down now. There was still a little bit left in the... Okay, don't hold it quite so tight. Okay? Stand what? Stand what? Okay, I think you're pulling the wrong one. Okay, I'm ready to pull it down now. There was still a little bit left in the...
Hi! Welcome to the podcast. This is how it's going to start. Moshe Kasher, welcome to the podcast.
Booyaka, booyaka.
Booyaka! Bah!
What's up?
This is my now control this now. Here we are, at day 65. Are you counting days at all?
I have a in my bedroom. I have like a pocket knife that I got from a guy that can get things, and so I whittle a hash mark for each day to keep track of how long it's been. So yeah, I've got my wall is covered in little hash marks.
Wait, what's covered in hash marks?
My bedroom wall. I just carve into the wall.
Oh, your bedroom wall. Okay.
Yeah, with a little whittling knife. So there's hash marks all the way down. My wife is not thrilled about the process, but I just think it's important to keep track.
Yeah. So what do you know what you're at then, if that's the case?
Well, I've also been playing a lot of video games, so I've missed some days. I've been a little distracted, so I only have 2 hash marks, but I think It's been a long 2 days.
What have you been playing?
I've been playing Apex Legends, and I just finished a game, actually.
Dude, Apex. You're kind of late to Apex, to be honest. Do you know that?
How do you know how long I've been playing? I might be.
Well, I mean, even if the fact that you're still playing is also a thing too.
Okay, well,
most people have. I love that game. That game to me, I had a time of it where I was like, couldn't stop playing that game.
well, I'll have you know that when they refer to the game as Apex Legends, they're actually referring to me, or I'm one of them.
Okay.
I'm one of the legendary.
Which character do you play then?
I main, as they say.
Wait, can I guess? Can I guess first?
Yeah, guess.
Okay, I'm gonna guess. I think you're not mating Bloodhounder. I don't think that makes sense for you. I think maybe you're what's the girl who's the healer?
The girl who
she's
what?
Jamaican, I think.
Oh,
she's a healer and
Lifeline.
She's Jamaican.
Lifeline.
Lifeline. I'm guessing your main Lifeline.
That's actually, to be honest, it's not my main, but it's actually really cool of you and your perception of me. I just really think it's a sweet perception that you have of me, that I would choose the healer. And I did, I guess, start this podcast by saying Booyaka, which might have given you a little clue, but
that's probably what happened. Yeah, you said that it's like it's a subconscious thing.
No, I mean Bangalore is the name of the one I'm playing right now. Right now, she's a bit of she's like a marine type, She can send out missiles.
She's a bruiser, I would say.
True bruiser. I'm more of a bruiser than a healer, and a lot of people think of me as a healer, a Jamaican healer, but I'm more of a black bruiser.
Well, the thing about the healer is also she does well on her own, because if you want to play the game by yourself without a team, you can heal yourself, and it's a lot of the streamers who play solo use Lifeline as their main character.
I'll tell you what I've been playing. I played recently. I was looking for a game that I could just play without because the reason that video games like Apex right now are so healing is because they're team based, so you can hook up with your friends.
Yeah.
And you can talk to your friends, and it's almost like hanging out. But I also wanted one that I could just play on my own. And I've just finished a game very prescient for our times called A Plague Tale, and it's all about the Black Plague infesting this area in France. And it was a super super fun game. And there's rats.
It's like
everywhere.
An RPG.
No, it's like it's a kind of action storytelling game. And
so what's it similar to? Like, is it similar to like a
It's a little
is there
similar.
A game style.
It's a bit of a mix between, like, I would say Horizon Zero Dawn and what's that game where you sneak around that the Japanese guy made, the famous sneak around game?
Metal Gear Solid.
Yes, it's kind of a mixture of Metal Gear Solid and Horizon Zero Dawn, taking place in the 1300s in France, and you play a little French girl.
That sounds cool. I mean, I guess I didn't realize how much of a gamer you were, because I I guess I don't game that much actually, or at least I don't have as much of diversity of games. I play like a lot of the same games.
No, I'm not a big gamer. I play about 5 video games a year, if that.
Okay.
Maybe 3 to 5 video games a year. I only like a very specific kind of game that is engrossing and has a really good story. And I don't play that much. But Apex isn't really like that. Apex is more of a now, when you said
Yeah, it's
you
run and gun. It's fun.
yeah, running and gunning, killing, shoot. Although, some of my friends just started doing Call of Duty online, and that's too much for me. I think that's like
See, I've been
war
playing
pig.
Call of Duty for many, many years, and I find it to be absolutely thrilling
You're a
to
bit
be
late.
like,
You're a bit late in the game to be saying you're still playing Call of Duty, to be honest.
you just won't let that die, huh? You're gonna. Do you play on PS4 or Xbox or PC?
I have a PS4. Yeah, I have an Xbox 2 and a Switch. And
Okay,
now, when you said you wanted to have a podcast with scintillating conversation, were you anticipating
right.
running through all of my gaming hardware?
No, I wasn't. I was sort of like thought this would be like an afterthought. I thought this would be the thing
John,
about gaming that gets me now is go ahead.
I have a
What it
question
gets
for
what
you.
were you saying?
I have a question
Yeah,
for
go
you, but I
ahead.
don't want to change the subject.
No, it's okay. We can always go back to it because I remember it.
Oh, great. You have a really, really well coiffed haircut, and I'm wondering how and what's up with that.
Well,
Oh,
there's two
you
reasons.
just turned your head. I
Two
realized you
reasons.
did it yourself.
Well, I didn't do it myself actually.
Yeah.
My wife did it.
Okay.
And this clearly looks like it's not supposed to look that way, but it's kind of grown on me actually, that look.
So it was a
Um,
mistake that became a choice.
well, it's not so much a mistake as it was like she doesn't know what to do. You know what I mean? Like, what
Mm.
do you do with this area? And I was telling her you should shave it, and she's like, I don't think I can because it'll look weird. I'm just like, well, whatever. I'll let you leave it as it is. I think the reason it looks good is because my hair is dirty, and also because it's grown out. It's been about 6 or maybe almost. Honestly, I'm not sure how many days it's been since I had this cut, but it feels like it's been about a week and a half. And so you know how when you have a severe cut, when it grows out about a week, that's when it looks the best. I think
Yeah.
that's what it is.
I mean, I was just thinking though, something that at first you regretted, but then it came to grow on you. I really relate to that because I have a daughter.
Right.
So then that's how I feel about her. Every day I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
Maybe this was a good idea.
They do get better, right? Because it's a thing when you first have that kid, they're just like this little alien ball of flesh that just screams and sleeps and poops, right? For a long time. They have no personality.
Well, my child came out reading Keats,
Okay.
but I've heard about these other kids. No, I'll tell you what, dude. Not to get too corny here, but
I enjoy corniness.
I had this realization last night that, like, especially at the age that my kid is at right now, like,
Mhm.
parenting is like this thing where if at any moment you focus, like if you look at the malaise of experience, then it's easy to just be like overwhelmed and like kind of like this is so much work, it's unbearable. But if at any moment you focus, you can see moments that can break your heart and make you cry in an instant. That to me is like what the power of like having a kid is that, like, if you can just focus in on what's actually happening developmentally with another human being that you love and care about, literally every moment in your house is a moment where you could be like overwhelmed with gratitude and joy. And so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I suppose that's interesting. I was watching this guy. There's this garden guy I follow on YouTube named James Prigioni, and he's just kind of he's very like talks really fast. He's got a real thick Jersey accent, but he has this amazing garden somewhere in New Jersey. And he was showing he has a little Yorkshire Terrier that walks around the garden with him. Just little, little shitty Yorkshire Terrier, tiny little piece of crap dog. And he's watching the dog go around, and he's talking about how he was saying how he likes to watch the dog in the garden because she's a good guard dog, and she also, she keeps critters out, and but sometimes she will eat some of the asparagus. She'll eat some of his plants because she wants to eat it. And he's like, that's just a tax I pay for having her. But he's also saying how It helps having her in the garden because he watches her move around, and it makes him sort of like pause and just realize just he said it in a great way, but really fast at the same time. Like said it really, he talks really fast, but just saying how it sort of gives him pause to assess a moment as opposed to just steamrolling through something. It makes you like sort of look at the greater situation and kind of just you're able to like focus on a moment like that through because you have this vessel.
Right. That reminds me of the other major. I wish you'd done it in the accent, by the way, when you were talking about the Priglione, the prig, as we call him.
The prig.
But the other major realization I had about parenting, all in this pandemic quarantine time, because like I've been having, and I think it's like the advantage you can rest out of this whole experience is that we're like, it's a pause on your life, and like we're all compelled forward by the fuel that we're dumping into the engine of our lives, like work and socialization and relevance and blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden you have this opportunity to kind of pause and assess a bit if you're doing this in a way that isn't desperate. And I know that there's some people who are in such desperate circumstances they don't have the opportunity to stare at their Yorkshire Terrier in their garden because they're more like, I don't have a garden, I can't pay my rent. But at any rate,
right,
it's like I had this realization, like, they call kids little bundles of joy, and it's like kind of this horribly corny descriptor of what a kid is. But I was like thinking about that last night. Like what it really is that if you do it right, and this wasn't always true because I guess probably when we were like hunter gatherers looking for berries, we were probably all having kids when we were like 14 years old. Like the minute you got pubes, you'd be like a grandfather or whatever. But but the way we do it now is like if you're about 30, 35, and you're like, okay, I'm going to have a kid. That is the age where the experiences of life have started to, for me anyway, maybe this isn't true for everybody, but the experiences of life have started to accrue to such a degree that you're less surprised by life. You're less.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Diminishing returns.
Yeah, you kind of are. You've experienced a lot. You become, not cynical is not the right word because I still love my life and loved my life and enjoyed it a great deal. But it was less of this like when you're in your 20s and your teens, every new experience, every new scene you go into, you're like fucking over. Every new sexual experience or drug experience or like human connectivity experience, or like just you're having these like static explosions of connection. And then about 30, 35, you start going like, yeah, I know life is this and it's good and I enjoy it. And then all of a sudden, if you have a kid, and obviously there are other ways to do this. I'm not a childbirth essentialist, but if you have a kid, then all of a sudden you move this being into your house that is having those experiences on an exponential level, because like you think about how excited you were when you were a teenager having those experiences. When you're a kid, like everything is a wonder. You pick up a pile of mud and you're like, fucking mud, so like that's what it is. It's like you infuse joy into your life again because you can experience it vicariously.
I've never heard someone say that before. I mean, I've heard people say everything you just said, but not putting those things together. Because I've always thought about that, like the idea of like, yeah, because for me, there's been a huge loss of novelty in so many things in my life. I feel like where it doesn't really give me the feeling it used to give me. I don't have the same thing, but what you're saying is basically, how you almost like you live vicariously in a way through your kids because they can experience that in a way that you can't anymore.
Right. And you get it by having them. That is a truly new experience. I mean, you take comedy, right? Like comedy, when I started comedy, every time I would kill, it would be like the best night ever. And then you do comedy. You do comedy long enough, and then you're like, well, okay, I figured out how to do well on stage. Like, then you're waiting for like the biannual, really special show where something happens, or you know what I mean? Like this was like twice a year. It's like, wow, that was a performance experience, Yeah,
it gets harder and harder to get to that place. It just gets. I mean, I've experienced that even with like backpacking and stuff, where I had like some crazy experience where I got like a huge rush of endorphins from some really gnarly thing we did. Then we go back next year, and I have to do like twice as much physical work to get to that same mental place where I'm like, I'm high right now. I'm so fucking high because my body is dying, yet my mind is like clear. And every year it kept taking more and more to get to that experience.
Right. Well, they talk about that like these people that go to war, because that's
Right.
as out there of a human experience as you can have, as being in combat, killing people,
Right.
watching your brothers die next to you, and just barely making it out alive. Right. They talk about people that come back from stuff like that, or forgetting something as gnarly as that. Like, I watched a lot of documentaries about mountain climbing. I don't know why. I have no desire to climb a mountain. I am Jewish after all. But
You're not allowed on a mountain if you're Jewish.
yeah, that's right. Well, not the German Alps. They won't let you up there. Still to this day, there are people up there that don't know that Germany lost the war, so they're still not allowing people up there. But these people,
they don't know they started a war.
That's right. These people that spend their lives building up this bigger and bigger adrenaline lifestyle. That they need that adrenaline dump to feel alive. And then, the saddest thing about all things like that is that you have to retire eventually. One of the saddest moments in this documentary I watched, it's not sad, but it's like, it was really interesting, was it was called Valley Uprising. It's on Netflix. It's really good. It's about the history of mountain climbing in Yosemite. And it starts with like the 30s, where it's these like old men, with like, they would bring like a pot roast up El Capitan, and they would do a rope lever thing, and they'd go up 100 feet in one day, then they'd lower themselves back down and camp, and then they'd go to that spot, and then they'd keep climbing, and all the way.
Royal Robbins, was he in it?
Yes, yeah, that guy was in it.
Yeah, because I used to rock climb as a kid, so I know a good amount about this.
Yeah, so it was like the history of that, and then they go from that all the way to that guy Alex, whatever, the free solo guy, right? Like the history of So basically, the guy that came before Alex Holland, or whatever his name is, the guy who was, started free climbing, but now is just a little too old to keep doing that on a competitive level. But he didn't die. A lot of those guys just straight up die.
Yeah.
He's now doing a thing where he ties a high wire, like a circus high wire, between two like Tetons in Yosemite, and just walks across it with no net. And it was like, because he's like, well, this is an unbelievably terrifying thing that my body can still handle, and I can't really face life without this level of adrenaline. Like that. Yeah, that's something you don't want to get to, where life is truly tapped out.
That's one of those things where I can't think who said it. It's I want to say it's like maybe it's Kant, or I'm not sure exactly. You'll probably know who it is, but someone said that the true frontier of life is the mind, and the idea that where if you you ever think about what happens if your legs broke or something like that? I always think about that. Like, what if I couldn't exercise? What would I do? And I wouldn't let myself go crazy. I'd have to find some way to stimulate myself that doesn't involve physical movement. It would probably be really, really difficult, but I'd have to find a way. Otherwise, I would probably wither away and die, or kill myself or something. And that's that whole. I think that's sort of starting to happen right now, as people are realizing like they can't do the things they used to be able to do to keep them sane and keep them like feeling good. So you basically have to face down your mind and find a way to generate that type of novelty or adrenaline or whatever it is that's getting you going. It's so much more difficult to do it when it's just your head and you don't have like a physical source of it from outside of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you reminded me of something that I heard this rabbi online say. He was talking about the pandemic.
Here we go.
And he said that non-Jews are not upset about the quarantine because their lives are not as valuable, and that the Jewish people.
What?
I thought you'd respond to this, Johnny. No, this is what he said. He said a lot of stuff that was kind of bullshit, right. But this thing I kind of honed in on, I really liked. It was, we all thought of ourselves that our work.
Wait,
and
you broke up a little bit there.
Okay.
You said we all thought of
ourselves as, and by the way, when I break up, Johnny, just know that I'm not breaking up on my end, so you're going to get a crystal clear recording of what I'm saying.
Okay, great. That's what I thought. I couldn't understand for my own sake,
I was saying that. He was essentially saying that we all thought of our work, our social life, going out to restaurants, going out to bars, hanging out with our friends, going to work, being out in the world. That was what our lives were. That it was life, right? And
Yeah.
then society shut down, and we all retreated into our homes. And lo and behold, we're still alive, right? Like we still have a life, whatever this is. It's like it kind of ripped open the illusion that that's what our life was. That there's something. And I was
Hmm.
thinking when I heard that, like it's a kind of similar idea to the way the Buddhists talk about like the thinking, the like thinking monkey mind, and then the mind beneath it, right? That we all know that we have um, multiple facets of what our mind is because we have the running commentary, and then we've got that thing that comments on it. So how can you have a thought?
Hmm.
That's like classic, new age spirituality about thinking 101, right? Is that when you realize that your brain is yelling at you, whatever the you is that's hearing that yelling that you get from the scolding you get from your brain is also your brain. And this is
Right.
almost like a more physical version of that Buddhist idea. It's like, okay, well, there's still a life, some other life. So that's what we get to be challenged with, to figure out, like, what is life here?
Without all the noise, without having so many things you can distract yourself with so easily. That's such a. I mean, I feel like for me, it's been easier. I think just because that's something I've had to deal with anyways. Just if you go from working a lot on something to all of a sudden not working on it, there's that thing that happens where you get depressed and feel worthless because you're not doing anything. I've gone through that a couple times now where I feel like, okay, there is light at the end of this tunnel, wherever it's something you can make it through. But it seems it's like for a lot of people that's not the case because they never had to experience that type of thing where you don't have anything. There's nothing you can do to. You can't make enough noise to cover the noise in your head.
Yeah. Now, I've been thinking a lot about the idea that all of these systems are completely man-made, and then we started to believe in them to such a degree that they have come to define us. Like the idea that if you don't have work, you feel
Oh
worthless.
yeah,
When
absolutely.
work is just something that somebody started doing at some point. Like it used to be berries, picking berries in the woods and running after saber-toothed tigers, right? But now it's like, oh,
Right.
if I don't have a writing job, or I didn't nail an audition, or I can't go to my law office and file briefs. Like, who am I really? Or the biggest example of that is the economy. And I don't understand
Yeah.
economics enough to understand what the alternative is. But like the idea, I always think about this. Like at some point in human history, somebody was like trading sacks of grain for sacks of sorghum, and
For
then some
sex.
for sack, and then
Yeah.
somebody was like, "Wait, what if I just gave you this cowrie shell and it represented my sack of grain, and you can come get it whenever you want, and I can fuck you now." And
Hmm.
then they were like, okay, and then that created the economy, and then that created the market, and then the stock market, and then now all of a sudden there's 10,000 homeless people in Los Angeles because they can't afford housing. Like
Yeah.
we basically created a thing and then lost control of it, and now here we are. The whole thing is shut down. The thing, like we basically have created systems that we can no longer control, and they can ruin our lives and define them. And I don't know what the way out of it is, but it just seems like we should figure something out.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like there isn't really a way out. People keep saying when this is over and stuff, and I was saying that too a lot. Now I kind of think there isn't really going to be an over. It's just going to be it's going to be so radically different that the idea of it anything that anything that happened before this is going to be like, wow, I'm so glad I did that when I did do that because I could.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Like anything, it's
I
just going to be.
Well, what's going to happen
Mhm.
is that it's people like us that are going to say that, but our kids and then their kids are going to forget this, and they're going to go and they're going to they're going to assemble the illusions of safety that we have. And I was like, in thinking about the pandemic, the Spanish flu of 1918, like I was like, oh, it's been the exact amount of time it needed to be so that everybody on
Mhm.
Earth forgot the acute feeling of what it was like to live through a pandemic, so that we were just
Yeah, it's
like,
kind of eerie, man. It's
it
kind
is,
of eerie
right?
how perfectly it just comes. You know, every once in a while, we got to have this thing sweep through to create a massive collective memory that is like, hey, remember that all that stuff you thought? It's gone.
Yeah. Well, my brother was talking about that. Like, he thinks, and this is super anecdotal, but he thinks that my grandmother was really sexy, and I don't remember that. No, he thinks
He th-
he thinks that my grandmother cared a lot more about the washing of hands, and that,
Mm,
like, not that my mom didn't care and not that my brother and I don't care, but we kind of have this vague memory of my grandma and people from that generation being like, cleanliness, wash your hands, like, be clean. And then it kind of like plinked down, and then the hippies came and they were like, hey, let's all fuck each other. And then we
right.
came and we're like these grimy 90s kids. And it's like, probably the reason that my grandma and my grandma's generation cared that much is because their parents consciously lived through the 1918
Pandemic.
pandemic,
Yeah.
and it became this like national obsession of wash your hands. And we're going to be
Yeah.
like that too for the rest of our lives. We're going to be telling our kids or the next generation, like, you got to be clean, you got to wash your hands. And then they'll take some of that, and then they'll give as much of that as they can to their kids. And then eventually, you know, if global warming doesn't wipe us all out first, they'll just be like, hey, we're the grubby generation, until, like, you know, virus X comes in 2050.
Yeah. It's also that thing where you see about signs how, you know, how spitting used to be such a thing you don't do. You would never spit.
Right.
And now I think people tend to spit more. But the whole thing back in the during the Spanish flu was they told people not to spit because it would spread the disease. Because you'd spit, someone would step on it and would just track this disease everywhere. And so it's almost like all these things that we look back on as being markers of like manners and like protocol for being a good person. A lot of that stuff is rooted, it seems like, in some sort of a cleanliness of that sense. Where, like, if you think about like maybe the upper classes are tend to be people who care the most about those type of manners, and maybe it's the reason that they are the upper classes because they, by practicing those things, it's allowed them to gain a foothold economically because they're not being subject to these diseases because they're smart enough to avoid it.
Well, I just heard,
That's, yeah.
speaking of that, that's super fascinating. But speaking of that, my brother and I were just talking about, now I am going to bring up the Jews in a sincere way. I know that upsets you,
Okay.
Johnny, but I'm going to do it.
You know what? As a I speak for the goyim. Okay, I'm a totem goy. That's my lot in life.
No, you're an apex goy. You're the top goy of all goys. Um,
Top goy.
but that Jews have always been obsessed with ritual, hand bathing and cleanliness. It's old
Hmm.
ritual that goes back to like Bible days, where there were, like, you know, ritual baths and stuff like that. So they've always washed their hands way before germ theory. Jews were obsessed with washing their
Right.
hands before they ate. It's just part of what you do. When you eat bread, you wash your hands before it. You say a blessing. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with cleanliness. It has to do with purity. But they're probably, if you're, you know, there's probably similar, you know, ideas. Probably, you know, people said, oh no, this is holy, you know, back in the, you know, 5,000 years
Right.
ago days. So in the time of the Black Plague, the very plague that I was playing through with the Plague Tale, my 1300s French video game, uh, and they say that a lot of Jews weren't getting affected in as big of a number by the Black
Mm.
Plague as their non-Jewish compatriots surrounding them in communities, which led to people accusing the Jews of spreading the plague or starting the plague. And
Wow.
now they're looking back and thinking, oh, maybe it was because Jews happened to accident themselves into a hand washing ritual that made them
Hmm.
just that slightly more clean and fastidious about washing their hands free of the plague.
I mean, it makes sense. That makes tons of sense.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. I
to be
mean,
honest, we did start the Black Plague, but that's irrespective
right.
of the broader logic of the story, which is wash your hands, kids.
Wash your hands and don't eat pork.
Don't eat, well, they say the same thing about pork. That
Right.
the you know, the more secular interpretation of why there's a biblical mandate not to eat pork is that probably at some point back when they were writing the Bible, there was some contamination happening within
Hmm.
the pigs, and so they said, oh no, it's actually God doesn't want us to eat pork, but it's really the infrastructure, the governmental hierarchy telling the people like to avoid food that would get you sick. That was the wet market of Babylon.
Right. Is there any someone must have written about this, about the idea of how this came about, because it seems some of that stuff seems too coincidental to be like, you could even chalk it up to maybe someone probably chalks it up to ancient aliens, right? Is that the fact that there's all these dietary laws across different religions, like Muslims and Jews have almost identical dietary laws. They just have different names for them. Like the fact that that's the case, doesn't it seem a little bit coincidental?
Well, it's not
Like it seems to be
coincidental in the case of the Muslims and the Jews, because in
right.
the case of the Muslims and the Jews, the Muslims came after the Jews and adopted a lot of the traditions and rituals. Those were region. A lot of those were regional traditions,
Right,
and
regional. I guess what I mean is, like, do you think there's something? Is there any evidence of it being a thing where, like, obviously, it's being it's done because the people say that it's coming from God. It's been ordained, but it seems like it's a scientific thing. So it's almost like something, it's like how you tell your kids something, don't touch this because of this reason, but they don't understand the actual practical reasons. You have to tell them something else.
yeah,
It feels a bit too perfect almost,
no, I definitely there's some reason that not only Islam and Judaism, but every single religion is concerned with what you eat, which I think is really weird. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like there are two things that I studied religion in college. That's what my degree was in,
Oh,
and
I didn't know that. That's cool.
yeah, there's two things that every religion seemed to have some opinion on, and beyond like general morality, things that seemed sort of arbitrary. One was like what you ate, right? Like
Hmm.
the Jews say don't eat pork and shellfish. The Muslims say don't eat pork, but you can eat shellfish. The Buddhists say don't eat, animals and garlic for some reason. I think the
I didn't know that.
Hindus say don't eat cows. Like it's just really interesting. Um, and in fact, I was reading Roots. You ever read Alex Haley's Roots?
I haven't. No.
Oh, there's a thing in there. I don't know how accurate it is because it's a fictional book, but with historical research. And he was talking about the Islamic tribes in
Africa.
ancient Africa, like
Hmm.
during slavery Africa, that they would have these rains and famines, and the famines were so hardcore that people would die, and there would be food. They could have gone and slaughtered like the Boers, but they wouldn't do that. They would rather have the community die than abrogate the dietary restriction, which I just think is like just a
Wow.
wild. But anyway, the other thing that they're all concerned with is uh, the periods. Every religion that I could find had some.
Wow.
None of them looked at a woman having a period and just went, "Ah, yeah, that's something that happens. Big deal." They all were like, "Oh, what does this mean? What is the
Yeah.
ritual around this?" Some of them celebrated it, some of them rejected it, some of them sent them to tents, but they all were like, "This blood must be dealt with on a cosmological level."
And is there consistency in how they deal with it, or no?
No, I mean, the Western religions mostly are like, "That's bad, you naughty, bloody creature, you." But the like old school kind of more animist, like tribal religions, a lot of them were like, "Oh, I don't remember exactly, but it would be this more worshipful thing of like, the
Yeah.
ah the spell, the sorcerer of the vaginal blood has arrived." I don't know exactly how they would deal with it, but none of them were
There's,
neutral.
there's also a crossover too, because aren't there some religions that forbid a woman menstruating from touching food or something like that? There's like a thing where
Yeah.
there's some real fundamental stuff like that. I think out there. I feel like I've read that.
That's, I think, maybe unfortunately a Jew thing.
Okay. Well, you know what? You can't have everything, guys.
You got to start the Black Plague. What more do you want?
Yeah. Who knows what the new thing is going to be now? I don't know if we're going to have a new one, because we're so like, there's just so much constant misinformation all the time. It's really kind of overwhelming. I feel like at this point that
What the new
there's
thing?
no way to know.
What new thing?
Like maybe a new type of type of hygiene thing that becomes like collectively incorporated. Obviously, we have all wearing masks and stuff, but
Well, there's something about the internet that, and just the flow of information and technology. I think this is kind of what you were saying, that almost seems like it's made the subconscious adoption of rituals impossible in the way that it used to be. Like
yeah.
back in the day, you know, they. I read that. Do you ever read Yuval Harari's *Sapiens*? Did you read that book?
I got about 3/4 of the way through it. I just sometimes with nonfiction, it gets so dense, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of I put
Well,
it down. I pick it up, put it down.
you probably read this passage that, like, basically humans to civilization would create some system to solve an immediate problem, and then by the time that system created problems that were consequences of the new system, it had been so long. It's kind of similar to what we were just talking about with the
Hmm.
plague and with the market, that we forgot the time in our history where we invented the thing and we just were like, well, this is what life is. You know, the example they were using is like um, the domestication of grain and animals, right?
Okay.
Where we became agrarian. Like, we did that because people were growing and we wanted to grow bigger and bigger communities. So it solved that problem.
Hmm.
100, 200 years, 300 years later, it had created these places where people were impoverished and the disease was spreading through communities and people were
Yeah.
unsafe and killing each other for each other's livestock. But we'd forgotten the part 300 years ago where it was like, oh, it didn't used to be like this. It used to be where we were all free and nobody owned anything and there was less disease.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to the thing, the consequence of the thing, you've forgotten that the thing ever didn't exist.
Yeah. Who know? Yeah, that's one of those things where it's kind of hard. I think your brain is telling you not to comprehend that.
Right,
It's like
right.
you shouldn't even think about that. You should think about the present moment only and solving problem, putting out fires instead of thinking about a fire starting.
Well, that's there's a logic to that, Johnny. Like, you're right. Like, all these books, like Christopher Ryan. Have you had him on your podcast yet? You know him?
I haven't. No, I've hung out with him a couple of times. He's
He's
great. Yeah,
a great guy.
he and I have a similar kind of mindset, but he takes it to a different level completely in
Well,
terms of like,
he wrote this book about civilization,
huh?
called Civilized to Death, and how things all used to be better before we created this infrastructure of civilization. And there's other and Sapiens had some similar ideas in it too, but it's also like, you're kind of
Yeah,
right.
definitely.
At a certain point, you're like, well, it doesn't even matter. These are all moot points, because, like, we're not gonna implode civil society and go back to, like, plucking berries and hunting boars in the jungle. Not only because we
You just
can't.
can't.
Yeah, you can't, and also we don't even know how. We've forgotten all that information.
Yeah, I always think about the idea that I mean, I'm not like a I don't know. I kind of ride the fence a lot with a lot of stuff. When you see like certain people who are on the far left being like just really worried about climate change and all that stuff, and obviously you have people on the far right who are deniers of it. I obviously believe. I don't believe in climate change. It's not like a belief thing. It's a thing where obviously this is happening. But I'm of the
You're just looking forward to it.
well, kind of, yeah. Actually, I kind of feel like all this stuff is just stuff that's coming down the fucking pipe, and we can't really just. The idea that we can alter that is, I think, a hubris beyond anything that's ever been had. But like the idea that we can, like, obviously we can change some of our behavior, but I think the vast majority of people. I always think about this saying, you don't wash your clothes if they're not dirty. So I mean, if you have a bunch of clothes to wear in your closet, a bunch of clean clothes to wear, but you also have a hamper full of dirty laundry, are you really incentivized to wash your clothes if you have other clean clothes to wear? I think that's how most people think, is they just don't want to do anything if they don't have to do it. You
Oh,
don't have to make any changes. Why would you change your lifestyle?
right. So, okay, just so I'm clear on what you're saying, so I can decide whether or not we can be friends in the future.
Right.
Um, you're saying if you were God, and
Yeah.
you could affect the behavior of all human beings, and you waved your God wand, which is what the Jews call the penis, and and made everybody change their behavior to one where they were, not using fuel and not flying, blah, blah, blah. If that were the case, you could stop climate change. But because human
Yeah.
beings are so diffuse and individualistic, it will never happen, and we will not be able to affect change on that. Is that what you're saying?
I think to some degree we cannot affect change because there's just so many people who are intractable in that sense.
Got it. Okay, so I understand what you're saying. Right. There was this essay that I read, and I realize I'm coming across like a complete snob by continuing to cite things, but you're just making me think so much, Johnny.
No, I like that. I can't cite shit. I'm like, this guy once said, I think it was a guy,
You're going to like this because I don't have any idea who wrote it. But it was in this class I had in college called it was a religion class, but it was about secularization and capitalism, basically. How this was kind of interesting, which was that the basic premise of this class was that when the Protestant Reformation came around, the Protestant Reformation, which introduced the idea into people's minds, you can choose your own religion based on what it is that appeals to your own individual spiritual sensibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Before that, it was like if you're born in this region, you're a Catholic. And if you're born in this
region,
you're
a Calvinist.
Yeah, well, this
the
is
king is right.
It's
pre-Calvinist, right?
Pre-Calvinism, I think. Yeah, but right, or you're in the Church of England. That's the way that it is. And then came the Protestant Reformation, which was basically like, no. Religion is about you, the individual, going on the market and saying, this is the product that I relate to and I want. That essentially, that it was the beginning seeds of the capitalist idea in the market, which is like, I am the customer. I go to the product that I like the most, and I will purchase the thing that I want, right? At any rate, there was this essay in there from he was an ecological philosopher, and this line,
I like this.
This line that he wrote in that essay, I've never been able to forget because it was really scary. He said that human beings are obsessed with the idea that any present calamity, no matter how severe, will be solved in an unknown future by a theoretical technology, right? And
that's called techno-narcissism.
Is that what it is? I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, it's called techno-narcissism, I think is what they call it.
That's interesting. And when I read that, I was like, oh, that's interesting because that's what we do with climate change, right? Is we just think to ourselves. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly what you're saying. We think that there's going to be some sort of a solution to it eventually that we don't know how it's going to be, but because we're so smart and we're always inventing stuff, it's going to happen just because everything's always gotten better. So why wouldn't that happen as well?
Exactly. And we can't and won't imagine a world in which our behavior actually leads to our real destruction. It's too incomprehensible. So we think, oh, no, they will solve it at that time. And the problem with that thinking is that it only works exactly as many times as it works. And the one time that it doesn't work is like the end of everything.
Yeah, it works until it doesn't.
Yeah, we just haven't gotten there yet.
And I really think that's just how, it's like a thing where you can't convince most people. I think a lot of people forget how dumb most people are. I don't mean that in like a way like, oh, you're bad, you're dumb. Most people just really don't think about a lot of different stuff. Right. And that's just how it is, just the bell curve, right? It's just most people are kind of like not really, all that jaywalking shit where they ask people who the president is and most people don't. There's people who don't know who the vice president, that kind of shit. And it's not because, they could be like very intelligent in one part of their lives, but a lot of people it's like, why would you care about this thing that really doesn't affect you that much, Well, it's actually, maybe it's increasing, but it seems increasing. Like the environmental stuff.
It's increasing and it's getting worse actually because of the internet. The internet provides so much information in such a tunnel that
on demand.
Exactly. It's beyond the 24-hour news cycle. It can be more than that because you could be playing 4 different videos at the same time. And so everybody is like these like little intellectual rats seeking confirmation for what they already believe. And anything you believe, there's somebody on the internet saying it. And so
Yeah.
it's actually getting worse because people are beginning to reject communities of expertise in exchange for a few YouTube videos and a strong gut feeling.
Yeah, man, that shit's fucking it's spooky. I've also noticed it myself a lot too. Not on that level, but more like where just my ability to pay attention to something and I can tell it's lowered. My ability to like focus on things and just because there's always this thing where you can look up the answer to any question you have so quickly that it's changed. I think it's changing how our brains work, and who knows. Like you think about Fahrenheit 451, right? All those guys memorizing the books. I don't think we could do that now. I
Right.
think my brain
We
wouldn't be
can
able to do
barely
that.
read books.
Yeah, so to be able to have like an oral tradition like that, any sort of thing where you pass it down because you have this massive computer that has all these folds in it to store stuff, it's just not being used like it used to be, and it has to be affecting the way humans are developing in some sense.
Well, that's back to that Chris Ryan, things we used to be better before civilization. It's weird because people were in some ways much less educated and in some ways way, way, way more educated. You know, it's like because
Yeah,
as technology is invented, the way the technology works, up to and including the ox and the plow, you take parts of your brain that you were using to do that work by going in with a stone and agitating the earth, and you go, oh, the ox does that now? So you take that part out of your brain, you hand it to the ox and the plow. And then you take this
yeah,
part of your brain and you hand it to the farmer. Because, I don't have to grow things. Farmers grow things for me. And then you take this part of your brain and you hand it to Google Maps. Like, I don't have to know where I'm going. Google Maps knows where I'm going. And then eventually you're
that's
like, what are you
that's a
left
big
with?
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the what do you call it? The mapping. What's it called? When the computer tells you where to go. The directional navigation. I think
Yeah.
navigation to me is like one of the things I noticed it the most. Where almost everyone uses navigation everywhere they go now. When's the last time you drove somewhere just without using it?
Well, the problem is, even if you know where you're going, they know how to get there better.
Yeah, I mean,
Daddy,
I
Daddy,
sometimes will.
Daddy Robot knows how to get there. Why? Who am I
Yeah,
to?
he knows. Oh, but that's the thing. I don't like using it. I find myself using it so much. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I know how to get to this place. I've been there 100 times, but I'm still have the map on there for some reason. And it's all that stuff where all this automation puts these parts of your brain to sleep.
Yeah. Hopefully your brain is becoming more sharpened and focused in the things like Johnny, you and I we have the ability to take our brains and focus them on the things that matter
Mhm.
to us, like, comedy and, that hopefully everybody's got a version
Yeah.
of that where their brains are like laser focused on their system of expertise, but no, probably not. We're probably all just dumber.
Yeah, we're getting to that Wally world kind of thing. Or not
Right.
Wally World from Vacation, but the Wally, the movie with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the fatties and the robot chairs.
Right.
Yeah. Do you see as far as like comedy goes, cuz I mean especially like any kind of live performance, all that stuff has been I got to wonder if there's ever going to be a return to what it used to be.
Oh, we're screwed. I mean, you get more acting work than me. Acting will be back. Stand up,
I think we'll be back.
stand up is like it'll be the last. I think it'll be the last thing to return. I mean, group sex is maybe the dead last, and that's pretty tough for me to
I don't know. Those
call
people, I think the group sex people are going to be like, fuck it.
it. Literally, stand by.
Yeah.
I got to plug in. Speaking of seeding my intelligence to technology. All right.
You know what's crazy is every person I've done one of these with has been using a laptop that isn't plugged in and they have to plug it in every single time. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, I am worried
Um,
about stand up. I just don't know. Somebody, I don't remember who texted it to me, but they were like, "Well, we knew the stand up bubble was going to burst. We just didn't expect it was going to be like this."
that's true because there definitely was a bubble. Somebody was talking about how they were in a green room with some big famous comic and how he was like, man, there's too many comics with Bentleys. This is not right.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Because comedians are supposed to be like rats, you know. We're supposed to be like little fucking shitty, scrawny rats that fight dirty and have like, you know, you can just take anything you got and you can live off of dirt and rainwater. But now we have these so many. I mean, it's just. I mean, we're an example, I guess you could say. You know, it's like
Are we
we're doing
rats
pretty damn well.
oh, we're good. We're doing good. I didn't know if we were
Yeah,
rats or not.
no, you and I are rats, but we're
Yeah.
successful rats.
Right. We're happy rats. We're fat rats.
Yeah, we're fat rats. That's the thing. I mean, that shit's gonna probably maybe go back to being like you're gonna be like a troubadour playing for 20 people in a square. You think like that?
Oh, an itinerant. If we really go back, yeah, we could be like itinerant comedians. We have like a wagon with our baubles that we carry from village to village, and we go like, gather round, ye townspeople, and let me do some observational comedy.
But this is what I was thinking about the other day, and this is what kind of scares me more than anything, actually. Like, I'm not like I mean, I read like both sides of the news a lot, and I'm kind of on a centrist sometimes, but I mean, I'm an apologist for a lot of right wing shit just because I don't know why. I'm not
What's
like
your
a supporter.
what's your right wing theory that you believe that is the most controversial and that you've never talked about in public?
Oh,
No,
I'm
I'm
not
just
really
kidding.
sure. I don't think I
You
have.
don't have to answer. That was a joke question, Johnny. That
Well,
was
I'm not. But I know it was a joke question. But I was kind of thinking like, do I have one? I think it's more just like I tend to just it's like both sides. I'm like, oh, give me a break, kind of thing. But the thing that kind of worried me was thinking about how you know how it's mostly the right now that's like, oh, we need to get back to work. We need to start doing stuff. And there's all these people who are they're still having church services, and there's talk about having like the wrestling is still gonna have
right,
people
right.
in Florida. I even read something yesterday about how a NASCAR event or some sort of a racing event's happening like in Michigan or some bullshit, right? And I was thinking like, so what if it happens like a year from now? The only way you can do comedy is because the only people who are willing to go to shows with other people are those people.
Right, yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
all live comedy and live music is catering to that demographic, the people who aren't scared in their homes with kids with like, you know, fucking weirdo names that they won't assign a gender to at 3 years old, you know, that kind of shit. Or is it going to be like they'll all be at home and you'll be playing to people who are like, hell yeah, man, you're funny. You know what? I don't agree with your politics, but you're fucking funny, man. That kind of shit.
So I'll travel. If that's the case, then I will gladly travel to Tallahassee or to
Tallahassee.
or to Waco, Texas, with a plexiglass chicken coop that I bring with me on the road. And so I come out on stage, I lower it down around my body, you know, and I perform from within there. You know, I perform, I do my thing, and then at the end I say thank you, good night, namaste. And they all boo because they didn't enjoy the show. And then I scoot off stage with the chicken coop, and I am infection free.
I think I'm just gonna go get into it. Just do it. Just do the shows, and I don't know. I mean, I like playing to those audiences sometimes. I feel like they're always like,
well,
better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, I have a whole hierarchy of good audiences and bad audiences culturally.
Yeah.
And the worst audience definitely is an audience full of woke white people. That's as bad as it gets.
Oh my God, it's the worst. Yeah.
Yeah, that's as bad
Truly
as it gets.
the worst.
Yeah, if they're
remember when I first learned that.
Politically uptight people, white people who don't actually have any diversity in their personal lives, but a lot of diversity in their intellectual lives. That's the group you don't want.
Yeah, it's terrible. I remember when I first learned that. I can remember that I was in the improv lab before it was, you know, back when it was just a nasty little black box.
I
remember Chris Fairbanks telling me how bad his show was in San Francisco, and I was like, "Why?" It's like and he was saying how he told some joke about you're all so something basically about how you're all so aware. This is like 10 years ago, you know, this is before woke was even a word. You're just all so aware of everything that you won't even laugh at yourselves, something like that. And I was like, oh my God. So I always thought the opposite would be true. You know, you go to San Francisco and it'd just be this crazy, awesome energy because everyone's so unbridled and crazy.
Well, I will I will make an argument for San Francisco being a good comedy town because it's where I started.
I
And
agree. Actually, I've had some of my favorite shows ever there too. So
yeah,
it
and
kind of
I think the reason that San Francisco, at least the punchline, can be so
uh
good is the top audience is a racially diverse audience. Because if
mhm.
everybody's in there, then everybody can laugh at each other. If everybody's
Right.
sitting together, then it's really when it becomes homogenous that it becomes uncomfortable. So and
Yeah.
the crowds in San Francisco used to be anyway, and to some extent I think they still are. People from all over the Bay Area. The Bay Area is a very diverse place. San Francisco, not a particularly diverse place, but the crowds used to be like kind of everybody. So my argument will for audiences is number one, racially diverse,
Hmm.
bottom of the barrel, woke white people, and I would say number two, all Filipinos. I would say that's the second best crowd you can possibly get as a
Have
fully
you ever
Filipino
performed
crowd.
to all Filipinos before?
Yes, I'm not making a joke. The best audiences one could want.
And that kind of makes sense to me because Filipinos do have like they have they have a Spanish background, right? Way back
Yeah.
when there is a
Oh,
lot of love for working class things like cooking and grilling and
uh-huh.
MMA. There's a lot of that is big in the Pinoy community.
I like what you're saying. Maybe it's that because the Filipinos are, in fact, a culture that in and of itself is diverse. So they're one part Spanish,
Right,
white and Latin, and one part
right.
Asian. In one Filipino lives the diversity of a multiracial crowd. I like this.
That's yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you're right though. I mean, all the Filipinos I know are they're that way. They're great. It's the ultimate audience. I can't believe
Yeah.
we
So
figured this out. Damn.
well, we figured it out. We figured, and also I have all kinds of racial hierarchies. The two races you don't want to be heckled by, or cultures you don't want to be heckled by. As a person that does a lot of crowd work, you have to be on your toes with an all black crowd and an
Hmm.
all British crowd. Those are the two groups you
Yes.
don't want to be heckled by because they're going to heckle you and they're going to be funnier than you, and you really have to
Yeah.
beware.
Yeah. I've heard that in England, it's almost like their tradition
Yes.
is to, and that's a hard thing to get used to.
Yeah, they'll
I
make
mean,
fun
I
of
never.
you. They'll make fun of you, and if you come back well, then they'll settle in and go, "Great, this is a good comedian. Let's see what he has to
Yeah.
offer."
God, this is gonna. I mean, just the idea of doing comedy again after taking off for so long that's also daunting too. Just the idea of it. I think there's a lot of people who just aren't going to come back. It's too much
You
of
think
a.
so?
I think so because it's kind of like if you don't have to and you don't feel like some sort of a primal need to do it, why would you do that?
Well, that'll be good because I don't know if you noticed this. I'm sure you did. The last 10 years, the stand-up comedian it has been to the last 10 years what the DJ was to the 10 years before that. It's like 10 years ago, everyone was a DJ and then they also had their
Yeah.
job. Now it's like you
Hmm.
look at people's Twitter bios, it's like anti-racist activist, ecological theorist, journalist for BuzzFeed, stand-up comedian. It's like, wait, is everybody a comedian now?
Yeah, it's really waters it down quite a bit.
Sure, but
I
that's
really,
what
I
happened.
don't know.
That's what happened in the 80s too. We were just in the middle of cycles. Like in the 80s, comedy got really big because of Eddie Murphy and Andrew Dice Clay and
Uh-huh.
all these people that were really famous back then. And then all of a sudden, all these comedy clubs opened up and there was all these great comedians. But then because there was all these clubs, all these people that really shouldn't have been doing comedy started. And then everybody started going, oh, I guess comedy sucks. And then all the comedy clubs shut down because there weren't enough
Yeah.
good comedians to keep them filled. And then in the early 2000s, it kind of ramped up again and created what we've got now.
Yeah, it's definitely. So maybe this is a good part of the pandemic is it's going to destroy the comedy bubble. And if you come back after this, it means you really want to do it, and you're just going to be so much. God, I really don't see. I haven't seen anything yet of anyone talking about how live performances will start again, like
I don't see
how
it
it's going to
either.
work,
I don't see it. Would you? Here's the real question. You're a comedian. I'm a comedian.
right?
Would you think about going to a comedy show? I would right now, the way I feel psychologically, I would never go to a comedy show right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to be on stage because you're apart from people enough to where you
Right.
can kind of you would feel. I mean, technically, it's the 6 foot thing, which I think is kind of an illusion already. But you're farther enough away. But yeah, but that's what to me is that's why I think it's going to be the redneck contingent is going to be the first
Welcoming
audience
us
members.
back.
Yeah, because they're the only people who are like, yeah, I'll fucking sit. I don't give a shit about that.
Uh-huh.
I'll sit. I mean, that's all bullshit. If I would have got it now, if I was gonna get it, so if I'm gonna get it, might as well be at a comedy show.
It's like
kind of thing,
the worst place that I would want to catch a fatal disease. The last
that's
place
the worst
on
place
earth.
you'd want to catch it.
That's right.
I think someone else might be like, man, this is fucking great. Get to see some music and laugh. I'm fine with it.
I mean, I hear what you're
That's
saying about the performer having some distance, but also like you have an audience of 100 to 500 people going ha 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 at you, like pointing their mouth. I don't know if people do that when you perform, Johnny, but when I perform, people go they go ha ha ha, and that also sounds a little concentrated.
Yeah. I mean, I get a lot of crying and gasping. So
well, that's good because that goes down. Gasping is in, crying is down, hawing is out, and you don't want that.
No. Yeah, it's just I wish someone would model that. Someone would figure that out because that's because I've seen some of my musician friends are really freaking out. They're the ones who, because you can't. I mean, you can do your little Zoom comedy show and it feels good for a second, but it's obviously that shit's not sustainable.
Right. No, totally. And
not the same.
Also comedy is lucky in that you can have 1,000 jobs. You don't just be a stand-up. Yeah. You can write for TV, you can act, you can do a talk show, there's a million things that you can do. And when you're a musician, I feel like the options are a little bit lesser.
Yeah, it's so performative. And unless you want to just record, I mean, there's a lot of people who just do recorded music, so you can do that, I guess. Maybe it's just, who knows? It feels like it's a big deal though to have to lose. I just wonder when it's going to be a thing where, collectively, we're so distant from everyone in terms of being able to go to like a group event, experience something as a group, which is like an undeniable sense something happens in your brain when you're experiencing something collectively. Not being able to do that, and also like the lack of physical touch, when it's going to have this thing where it's going to start to have an actual, like almost like a secondary infection in a sense.
You're saying like a psychological infection, that it will change the way we are.
Yeah, psychological infection that's going to dramatically change people, because there's never been in the history of time where that's happened.
Well, I can already feel on some small level. I mean, I'm sure it'll go back to normal. I hope it'll go back to normal. But like, when someone walks toward me, I feel like there's a poison or a snake coming towards me, and that's an unusual. It's an unusual, and it's probably not even. I don't even know if it's logical, but I feel this, reaction to like, go away from me. Even when it's my brother, or I go for a walk with my brother, he gets too close to me and I recoil. And that's not how human beings are supposed to be. You're supposed to want your brother to hug you. I mean, imagine hugging a person. Imagine hugging me, John.
Yeah. I can't imagine it.
It doesn't seem right. It seems wrong. And that's before the pandemic. You wouldn't hug me. Because I was always asking you, please hug me, John.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I feel the worst for people who are alone. If you're like alone, you don't have you obviously have your wife and your kid. So you've got.
No, there's worse than alone. Natasha and I do a relationship advice podcast where people call in with their relationship issues, and there's a lot of people who realized that they needed to break up with people, or that they were with a piece of shit right when the pandemic started, right when they decided to bunker down and quarantine together. They're like, oh no, I was in a relationship with this person for 3 months, but because we were so busy, I felt like they were cool. Now that we're together all day, I'm actually with a complete fucking asshole and I don't have anywhere to go. That's worse than being alone, I think.
I think that is definitely. It also kind of goes back to the whole primitive idea of it, where it's like, well, you have to fucking. It's these times where you have to fucking figure that shit out. I guess it
Right.
sucks, but what else are you gonna do? You're
Right.
just
It's like,
like, this is.
yeah, it's like I was in an argument with somebody today about social distancing. It was like, we have to be able to do what we want and go outside now. It's bad for your mental health not to go outside. And I was like, well, Anne Frank lived in an attic for 3 years. Like, that's
Yeah.
bad. This a
Mhm.
momentary 4 month disruption in our ability to like go play rugby. It sucks, but it's not. It's not that.
Yeah, we have to. You have to just adapt, essentially.
But
And I
speaking
think they
of,
just.
sorry,
Well, I was just trailing off, basically.
speaking of right wing people protesting and like having intellectual empathy for them, like yes, the messaging in some of those rallies is completely fucking bonkers, and yes, the idea that COVID is like a lie is like just being willfully ignorant, but
Uh-huh.
but if you take away the rhetoric, the skin of rhetoric on top, which is being fueled by ideology, underneath it is like, well, I'm thinking to myself, what did we expect to happen when we took away people's livelihoods? Who is surprised that there are rallies where people are going, I need money. I have to pay my bills. I have to eat.
Yeah.
Forget the weird like Ku Klux Klan hood with the, alien eyes saying like, 9/11 created COVID. Like if you just get rid of the like top layer of insanity, underneath it is like, well, yeah, people are desperate. Of course they're in the streets saying, give me my money back. They need to buy food.
Yeah. They're going nuts, and there's no real end in sight for it. They have to, it's just like a reaction.
Right,
So it
exactly.
makes sense to have a reaction to that. But
Well, hopefully this will all
yeah,
pass sometime soon, and we'll all be back to performing at the Yuck Yucks chain.
oh, I can't wait to go to Yuck Yucks in Edmonton.
Oh, I got to get back to Edmonton. I got to
Go in the
get back
middle of
there.
winter when it's 40 below.
There was
I
a
haven't been there.
I don't think it is a Yuck Yucks. Edmonton, I think, is the one that's in this mall. I'll never forget. It's
Okay.
the biggest mall in Canada, and there's a comedy club. I don't remember what it's called. Anyway, I was right across from the comedy club. There's a Hooters, and this Hooters waitress walked out, and she's in her little short shorts and crop top. She walked out and took a left, and then this one of the janitorial staff was this Muslim woman in a full like Sharia hijab, like beyond a hijab, the like only see a slit
Burqa?
of but it wasn't quite a burqa. It's what they have in like
Okay.
Saudi Arabia, where it's like
Right.
only the eyes. And
Yeah.
the Hooters waitress and the burqa woman walked towards each other, and it was like, I wish I could have painted it or taken a picture, just like the two sides of subjugation. Like who's the oppressed person here anyway?
That's funny. It was in Canada, in Edmonton.
In Canada, yeah, in the epicenter of politeness.
What else? So, what do you have going on in the next couple of weeks and months? Anything you want to?
Next couple,
anything you're thinking about?
I mean, if I'm telling people what to watch of me, my old
Yeah.
special is just got put on Amazon Prime for free. That's called Moshe Kasher Live in Oakland. And my newer special is on Netflix. It's with Natasha. It's called the Honeymoon stand-up special. Natasha and I are doing episodes of our podcast from our bunker, just like you. It's called the Endless Honeymoon Podcast. And I just released an album, a month before all this went down. It's an all crowd work album called Crowd Surfing, and that's on Spotify. So if you want to waste your days away with content that I created, there's a lot of it out there for you to listen to and watch.
The last crowd work album ever.
That's right. Yeah, when there were crowds. Remember crowds?
Crowds.
Ooh.
God, I can't wait.
Maybe I
want to get infected.
I'm going to tweet. Oh, yeah, get infected. That's how it is, Johnny. That's how we're going to recreate stand-up. Everybody gets infected, herd immunity, and they get the tattoo on their neck that says recovered COVID, and they bring their paperwork to the club. And then when you present your paperwork and your tattoo, you can come into the club and watch some comedy again.
Can't wait for it. I'm looking forward to that. I got a nice space here for it. So
it would look good, especially with the haircut.
Thanks for being here, Moshe.
Thanks for having me, Johnny. I miss you. I can't wait to hug you.
Likewise. We'll be in
Bye.
touch.
Okay,
Take care.
bye.
Thank you for listening to Live to Tape Podcast with Johnny Pemberton, also known as the Executive Buffet, Hands on the Branch, and Daddy's Big Red Truck. Please check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/live to tape. That's patreon.com/live to tape, where you can find weekly audio and visual goodies for your enjoyment. Thank you for listening, and please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done so. Bye.